From a young boy in Queens to one of the most powerful men on earth. This isn't just a story of politics. This is the story of a man who turned his name into a brand, his failures into fuel, and his ambition into a revolution. Whether you love him or hate him, you can't ignore Donald Trump. Let's rewind to where it all began. Donald John Trump was born on June 14, 1946, in Queens, New York City, the fourth of 5 children. He grew up in a wealthy but disciplined home. His father, Fred Trump, was a strict businessman, a man who built low-cost housing across Brooklyn and Queens. From a young age, Donald was different. He wasn't the quiet, rule-following kid. He was loud, confident, and competitive. By age 13, Trump's behavior had become too much for his parents, and they sent him to the New York Military Academy. But instead of breaking him, the experience shaped him. He learned leadership, discipline, and the taste of power. He rose through the ranks, commanding respect from cadets and officers alike. Trump wasn't just another student anymore. He was learning how to lead. After graduating, he attended Fordham University. But after 2 years, he transferred to the Wharton School of Finance at the University of Pennsylvania, one of America's top business schools. There, Trump sharpened his skills in economics, real estate, and deal-making. But even in college, he wasn't the kind of guy to blend in. He wanted to stand out. By the late 1960s, while most of his peers were figuring out their careers, Trump was already eyeing the skyscrapers of Manhattan. His father's business was successful, yes, but too small for Donald's vision. He wanted the big city, the big deals, and the big stage. After graduating in 1968, he joined his father's real estate company, Elizabeth Trump and Son. But within a few years, he'd transform it completely. He didn't just want to build houses. He wanted to build an empire, and that's exactly where the journey begins. From the disciplined halls of a military academy to the glittering skyline of New York City, Donald Trump was ready to take his first big swing at destiny. Every empire begins with one bold move, one risk that separates dreamers from doers. For Donald Trump, that move wasn't just business. It was Manhattan. The city that never sleeps was about to meet the man who never stops. It was the early 1970s. New York City was struggling, rising crime, collapsing buildings, and a near-broken economy. Most investors were running away, but Donald Trump, he was walking straight into the storm. While his father's company built middle-class housing in Queens and Brooklyn, Trump had his eyes locked on Manhattan, the land of glass towers and golden opportunities. Everyone told him he was crazy, too young, too risky, too ambitious. But for Trump, those words were fuel. His first big target, a rundown building called the Commodore Hotel, located right next to Grand Central Station. The place was decaying, filled with rats and graffiti. But Trump didn't see what it was. He saw what it could be. Armed with confidence and a phone book full of potential contacts, he began pitching the idea of turning the dying hotel into a luxury hotspot. But there was one problem. He didn't have the money. Not yet. Trump spent months negotiating, convincing bankers, and hustling politicians. His biggest win came when he managed to get the Hyatt Corporation interested in his vision. Together, they cut a groundbreaking deal, the first of its kind in New York's history, combining private investment with a major city tax break. In 1980, after years of persistence, the Grand Hyatt Hotel finally opened its doors. It gleamed like gold under the Manhattan sun. And suddenly, everyone knew the name Donald Trump. Reporters called him the young genius of real estate business. Magazines couldn't stop writing about him. And Trump, he loved every second of the spotlight. He wasn't just a businessman anymore. He was becoming a brand. That one deal didn't just revive a hotel. It revived Trump's confidence. It showed New York and the world that he could take something broken and turn it into a masterpiece. The boy from Queens had finally conquered Manhattan. The rise of the Trump Tower. Every legend has a landmark, and for Donald Trump, it wasn't just steel and glass. It was ambition turned into architecture. The world would soon know his name not through headlines, but through the skyline itself. It was the early 1980s. New York City was reborn, and so was Donald Trump. After the success of the Grand Hyatt Hotel, he wasn't content being just another real estate developer. He wanted a monument, a statement, something that screamed Trump. That vision took form in the heart of Fifth Avenue, one of the most prestigious streets in America. There, standing between Tiffany and Co. and luxury fashion houses, Trump imagined a tower unlike anything the city had ever seen. Not just tall, iconic. He bought the old Bonwit Teller department store building and began crafting his dream. Trump Tower, a 68-story skyscraper made of bronze glass and polished marble, a symbol of wealth, power, and style. But the journey wasn't easy. Critics mocked him. Unions protested. City officials doubted the plan. Yet Trump thrived on pressure. He pushed through every obstacle with relentless determination, convincing designers, bankers, and politicians that this project would redefine luxury living. Trump Tower wasn't just a building. It was a spectacle. When it opened in 1983, celebrities, business tycoons, and even royalty walked its golden halls. The marble atrium, the glistening waterfall, and the gold-plated elevators all screamed opulence. It became the new address of success. And at the top of it all, literally and figuratively, was Donald Trump. He didn't just build the tower, he lived in it. He made it his world headquarters, turning himself into both the product and the brand. Trump now meant more than a name. It meant luxury, power, and boldness. Media attention skyrocketed. Trump graced magazine covers, hosted interviews, and became the face of the 1980s boom. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a celebrity mogul. Trump Tower became the ultimate symbol of American ambition, a golden reflection of its creator's hunger for greatness. The brand that built a billionaire. Some build companies, some build legacies. But Donald Trump? He built a brand so powerful, it turned his very name into currency. From skyscrapers to casinos, from books to TV, Trump was no longer just a man. He was a movement. By the mid-1980s, Donald Trump had mastered the art of attention. Every move he made, every word he spoke, every deal he signed, It was all big, bold, and loud. He understood something most businessmen didn't. In America, perception is power. While other developers hid behind their corporations, Trump put his name front and center. Trump Tower, Trump Plaza, Trump Castle, Trump Shuttle. The brand was everywhere, gleaming in gold, shouting luxury. To millions, the name Trump came to mean success itself. His projects expanded beyond New York. In Atlantic City, he built lavish casinos, Trump Plaza, Trump Taj Mahal, and Trump Castle, transforming the skyline with his signature opulence. His motto was simple: if you're going to think big. But Trump wasn't just building buildings. He was building influence. He wrote a book, The Art of the Deal, in 1987, and it exploded. The book became a national bestseller, teaching readers not just about real estate, but about attitude. For Trump, winning was a mindset, and America was listening. By the late 80s, he was everywhere: magazines, talk shows, headlines. He flew on his own airline, drove around in limos with DJT plates, and lived in a penthouse dripping with gold. To some, he was the symbol of the American dream. To others, he was pure ego. But either way, people couldn't look away. He had turned his name into a global symbol of power and success. Trump was no longer just a brand. It was an identity. But behind the golden glow, dark clouds were starting to gather. The economy was shifting. The market was volatile. And the man who built his empire on bold risks was about to face his toughest challenge yet: the fall of the empire. Every empire looks invincible until the cracks begin to show. For Donald Trump, the man who built his name in gold, the 1990s would test everything: his pride, his empire, and his will to survive. The late 1980s had been golden years for Trump. He was the face of American wealth, private jets, skyscrapers, casinos, and endless publicity. But when the economy shifted, so did his fortune. The same bold risks that had built his empire were now threatening to destroy it. The real estate market crashed. The casino industry tanked. Interest rates skyrocketed. Trump's empire, built on billions in loans, began to crumble under the weight of debt. By 1991, he owed more than $900 million personally, and his companies carried billions more. Suddenly, the man who once ruled New York's skyline was drowning in red ink. Bankers circled like sharks. The media called him the biggest loser in America. Magazines mocked his downfall. Headlines that once praised his success now questioned his survival. Trump's luxurious image began to collapse. The Trump Shuttle lost money. The Trump Taj Mahal, his most expensive casino, was bleeding millions. Bankruptcy loomed over his head like a storm cloud. But if there was one thing Trump had mastered, it was the art of the comeback. Instead of disappearing, he went on the offensive. He renegotiated with 70 different banks, face to face, deal by deal, convincing them that it was better to let him rebuild than to destroy him completely. He sold off assets, cut costs, and focused on survival. For the first time in years, Donald Trump wasn't chasing fame. He was fighting for his life. By 1995, after years of struggle, Trump had done the impossible. He avoided total collapse. He wasn't as rich as before, but he was still standing, a little humbler, a lot tougher, and more determined than ever. The empire had fallen, yes, but the man refused to stay down. The comeback king. When the world counts you out, that's when legends are born. Donald Trump had lost it all. The money, the fame, the respect. But true to his nature, he wasn't done. Not even close. The man who once built towers was about to rebuild himself. It was the mid-1990s, and Donald Trump's empire was scarred but not shattered. Most people in his position would have disappeared quietly, but Trump understood one thing better than anyone else. In America, a comeback is the greatest story you can tell. He started small, focusing on stability instead of speed. He restructured his businesses, refocused on real estate, and slowly began rebuilding his name. His casinos in Atlantic City returned under new management, and his hotels began making profit again. But Trump knew that business alone wouldn't bring him back into the spotlight. He needed the one thing he always craved: attention. In 1997, he launched Trump Hotels and Casino Resorts on the stock market, putting the Trump name back in bold letters on Wall Street. He started appearing on TV again, talk shows, interviews, news features, always loud, always confident, always Trump. By the early 2000s, his timing was perfect. America had entered an age obsessed with fame, wealth, and success stories, and who better to represent that than Donald J. Trump? He turned his public image into a product, and that product was winning. Then came the game changer, The Apprentice. In 2004, Trump became the face of a brand new reality TV show that would redefine his image forever. Each week, millions tuned in to watch him judge aspiring entrepreneurs, ending each episode with the now iconic phrase, "You're fired." The show was a massive hit. Trump wasn't just back, he was bigger than ever. The world saw him not as a failed businessman, but as a billionaire mentor, a symbol of success and authority. Donald Trump had done what few ever could. He turned his downfall into a second rise. He wasn't just a comeback story. He was the comeback king. From celebrity to candidate, it began as entertainment, but it was always something more. The man who ruled TV, screams with "You're fired," was about to aim for the biggest job in the world. Donald Trump wasn't just chasing fame anymore. He was chasing power. By the mid-2000s, Donald Trump was everywhere. The Apprentice had turned him into a global icon. His face, his voice, his style were instantly recognizable. Viewers saw him as the ultimate symbol of success. The man who made tough decisions and never backed down. But behind the cameras, something was changing inside Trump. He began to see America itself like a struggling business, mismanaged, disorganized, and in desperate need of a leader who could make the big deals. Trump started talking more about politics on interviews, radio shows, and public appearances. What started as offhand comments soon turned into serious opinions about trade, taxes, and national strength. People laughed it off. Donald Trump for president? They joked, but Trump didn't laugh. He listened, because for the first time, millions were actually nodding along. By 2011, whispers began turning into headlines. Trump questioned political leaders, spoke out about America's economic decline, and criticized the establishment with a confidence few dared to show. His blunt, unapologetic style resonated with a frustrated public. Then came his biggest stage yet, when he officially announced his candidacy for President of the United States in June 2015, standing under the golden escalator of Trump Tower, surrounded by cheering supporters and flashing cameras. He declared, "We are going to make America great again." Those words became a movement. The political elite dismissed him. The media mocked him. But ordinary Americans, factory workers, farmers, veterans, saw something real in his fire. He wasn't polished, but he was authentic. He spoke their language, raw and unfiltered. The businessman turned TV star had now become the unlikeliest political force in modern history. The same confidence that built skyscrapers was now shaking Washington to its core. Donald Trump wasn't running just for power. He was running to prove everyone wrong. The shockwave election. No one saw it coming. Not the politicians, not the pollsters, not even the media that followed him day and night. What began as a long shot soon became one of the most shocking victories in American history. This was the shockwave election. When Donald Trump announced his candidacy in 2015, almost no one took him seriously. Political experts laughed. News anchors smirked. Career politicians dismissed him as a publicity stunt. But while the establishment was laughing, Trump was connecting. His rallies were electric. Massive crowds chanting "Build the Wall" and "Make America Great Again." He wasn't reading from scripts or poll-tested speeches. He spoke straight from the gut. His blunt words, his confidence, his defiance, they cut through the political noise like a thunderclap. Trump's campaign broke every rule in the book. No traditional donors, no polished slogans, just raw energy, social media mastery, and a message that hit deep in the heart of working-class America. He called out corruption, questioned the media, and branded his opponents with unforgettable nicknames. Love him or hate him, everyone was talking about Donald Trump. As 2016 unfolded, the impossible began to happen. One by one, his Republican rivals, governors, senators, and lifelong politicians fell before his momentum. By July, Trump officially secured the Republican nomination. The outsider had defeated the insiders. Then came the final showdown, Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton. The media predicted an easy win for her. Polls showed Trump trailing. Experts said he didn't stand a chance. But election night told a different story. State after state turned red. Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, all flipping toward Trump. By midnight, the unthinkable became reality. Donald J. Trump had won the presidency of the United States. Crowds erupted. The world was stunned. Supporters cried tears of joy, while critics stared in disbelief. Trump stood on stage, victorious, declaring, "The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer." From a businessman in Queens to the 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump had just rewritten the rules of politics forever. The disruptor in the White House. He didn't just win the presidency, he rewrote the rulebook. Donald Trump didn't step into Washington to fit in. He came to shake it up. What followed was one of the most controversial, unpredictable, and unforgettable presidencies in American history. January 20th, 2017, the world watched as Donald J. Trump placed his hand on the Bible and became the 45th President of the United States. The businessman who once ruled boardrooms now stood on the steps of the Capitol, promising to return power to the people. From the very first day, Trump made it clear his presidency wouldn't look like anyone else's. He bypassed traditional media, speaking directly to millions through Twitter, unfiltered and unapologetic. Supporters saw a leader who spoke the truth. Critics saw chaos into 180 characters. But love him or hate him, you couldn't ignore him. Trump's White House was a whirlwind of bold decisions and non-stop headlines. He slashed regulations, pushed for tax cuts, reshaped trade deals, and promised to bring jobs back to America. His America First agenda resonated deeply with millions who felt left behind. Internationally, he stood firm, confronting China, meeting North Korea's Kim Jong-un, and challenging long-standing global alliances. For some, he was restoring American strength. For others, he was dismantling decades of diplomacy. Inside the Oval Office, every move sparked debate. His immigration policies drew both fierce loyalty and fierce opposition. The media covered him 24/7, every word, every tweet, every controversy. Yet through it all, Trump thrived on the attention. He was, as always, the center of the story. Then came the storms, investigations, impeachment trials, and constant political warfare. Washington had never seen anything like it. But even in crisis, Trump's base stood strong. To them, he wasn't a politician. He was a fighter standing against a broken system. By the time 2020 arrived, America was deeply divided, but undeniably changed. Trump's presidency had redefined politics, power, and how leaders connect with the people. He hadn't just occupied the White House, he had disrupted it. The legacy of the lion. Every rise has its storm. Every leader faces his reckoning. For Donald Trump, the man who defied odds, broke rules, and shocked the world, the final chapter of his presidency would test not just his power, but his legacy. It was 2020, the year that changed everything. A global pandemic, economic turmoil, and social unrest gripped America. The election that followed would become one of the most heated and divisive in U.S. history. Trump faced Joe Biden, a career politician representing the old guard, while Trump stood as the face of defiance, rebellion, and raw populism. The campaign trail was chaos, rallies, debates, and headlines filled with controversy. The nation was split down the middle, one half chanting for more years, the other shouting, "Vote him out." When the votes were counted, Joe Biden was declared the winner. But Trump refused to concede. He challenged the results, claiming fraud, igniting a storm of protests and political chaos that culminated in the events of January 6, 2021, a day that would stain American history forever. The Trump presidency ended not with silence, but with noise, division, loyalty, fury, and fire. But even after leaving the White House, Donald Trump didn't fade into the shadows. He built a new base, stronger than ever, reshaping the Republican Party in his own image. Rallies returned. His voice dominated media once again. Trump became more than a former president. He became a movement, an ideology, and to millions, a symbol of resistance against the establishment. Whether you see him as a savior or a storm, one thing is undeniable. Donald Trump changed America forever. He broke traditions, rewrote political playbooks, and forced the world to look, really look, at what leadership, power, and influence mean in the modern era. From the golden towers of Manhattan to the Oval Office, from business empires to political warfare, Donald J. Trump's journey wasn't just about success. It was about survival. He was loved, hated, cheered, and condemned, but never ignored. Because in the story of power, there are builders, there are dreamers, and then there are disruptors. And Donald Trump, he was all three.